Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here today, taking an hour or less than an hour of your Sunday. I appreciate that. We should be well under an hour. I'm thinking 40 to 45 minutes, depending on questions. Okay. So you should see my PowerPoint. Oh, actually, I don't want to share that one. I want to share this one. Okay. You should see my PowerPoint. Please let me know if you do not see it, because that would be an issue. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to get started. And again, my name is Jenny Kedward, and that's me in case you missed my video. We should be out of here again in about 40 minutes or so. We're going to go through some background of why this is so important for us to talk about wasted food, and then go through the tools and how to report data, and then we'll be done. All right, so first things first, how much food do we waste? And when I say, I'll be very intentional about the words I use when I talk about food waste. We actually, in this program, like to call it wasted food, even though we say food waste challenge, just because it's kind of easier for people. But wasted food is different than food waste. Food waste puts a lot of emphasis on the word waste, how to deal with the waste. You know, do I compost it? Do I feed it to the dog? Do I throw it in the trash? When really wasted food puts the emphasis on the word food and why we didn't eat it, how we wasted it. And so it's very specific of how we talk about wasted food. So you'll understand why as well. So here we go. Why is this important? The National Resource Defense Council came out with a study in 2012, and then they updated it and released a 5-year version, or after 5 years in 2017, pretty much blowing the can open on how much food we're really wasting in America. In the U.S., we throw out 40% of all the food in the U.S. We buy it, we grow it, we don't eat it. 40% of all food, which is shocking. So I just want to let that sink in for you. 40% of all of our food goes to waste. That's not just talking about our trash cans. We know food, the food industry, food manufacturing is very resource intensive. So you can see on the left there is our crop circles. Most of our land in the U.S. is used for growing our food. We might think about big cities being the biggest wasters, or maybe oil fields or something like that. But actually, farming is is what we use the majority of our land for. And we wasting or growing food that we don't eat costs almost 20% of all of our cropland. And not just that, we spend over 20% of all of our fresh water to grow food that we don't eat. These are just two statistics of why wasting food wastes more than just food. It wastes a lot to go into it. We also waste the fertilizers, the weed killers, the herbicides, everything that goes into it, growing food, the labor, the time to spend growing our food. That's the environmental cost. We also know that 1 in 6 kids in Minnesota is food insecure, which means they don't know where their next meal will come from. They might not be starving, but they're just unstable. They don't know where their food will come from. So we know wasting food really wastes way more than just the food. It wastes all of the environmental or all the natural resources that went into growing it, and it wasn't eaten by those who really need it. One of the first things people tell me when I start talking about wasting food is they say, Jenny, I don't waste food. I compost everything. And I love that, of course. I'm a big composter. I teach composting classes as well. I know it's a big part of our waste system. We need to compost. But even if we composted all of that 40% of the food that we throw out, if we composted all of that, we're still wasting all the resources that went into creating the food. So it's still not going to solve the food problem that we have. And it's still not being eaten. The second thing people talk about, tell me is, oh, Jenny, you should go talk to those restaurants, those cafeterias. They're the biggest wasters. Well, let's talk about that. It's actually the National Resource Defense Council report really targeted or really quantified who is wasting all this food. First, we have waste at every level. First, in producing our food. So on the farms and in the processing of our food. That picture on the left where it says rejected, that's a man who is big in the trying to shine a light on this issue. He's very tall, just to give you, he's like almost 7 feet. So just to give you a little proportion to the bananas, he's standing in front of a huge pile of bananas that were harvested and not used. They were thrown out, went to the dump because of the shape that they were. So they were the wrong shape. Grocers didn't want to buy it because of a certain shape. So our bananas have to have a certain length and curvature required by grocery stores. Now, not to blame grocery stores, because who shops at grocery stores and demands this perfect food? We do. But it goes all the way back to the farm and who's buying that food. That's in South America, but it happens in the US as well. I think as we get our food more and more from grocery stores, we forget and stop growing it ourselves. We forget that it's pretty rare actually to grow a perfect tomato or a perfect strawberry. They're often imperfect or funny looking, but we've gotten so used to the perfect look of them at the grocery store, we forget that it tastes just as good if it looks a little weird. Then processing too, you'll see on the right-hand side, that is a whole pile of potato peels from a processing plant making potato chips. So you don't usually see potato peels on your potato chips. Well, this is why. They get peeled. The potatoes get peeled before they get sliced and fried or baked. And all of that's nutrient content right there going to waste. That's just one example. Whenever we process food, we take a little bit more out of the food to process it into what we want. Now we're getting a little closer to us. Now we're seeing some of the food waste. This is really where people assume all the wasted food happens. And it does. Restaurants do waste a lot of food, and go to cafeterias. And we see it more because it's, at one time we see all of this food in front of us, so we assume it's not going to be eaten. This is an example from a buffet. And it's actually in our psychology. These studies are usually done by people looking at our eating habits and dieting and nutrition habits. Well, in a buffet like this, we actually, once the food in a tray gets down to a certain level, we as humans don't want to eat anymore because we assume it's really old or it's been there for a long time, even though it might have just been put there, but we don't, our subconscious thinks that it's old. So these trays have to be plentiful all of the time. Same thing at a grocery store. It's been shown that if you go buy tomatoes and there's only one tomato left in the bin, no one will take it because something's wrong with it. Why isn't that tomato being eaten? Even though there's nothing wrong with it, we just, our subconscious is playing tricks on us. Also, portion control. The two pictures of the plates right here of what you're served and what we should be served, what we need to eat, those pictures are usually mentioned in, when you're talking about dieting or portion control, but it's also in our industry of food waste. So now you're served all this food, you should only be eating half of it, so you're either forced to overindulge, which we all do, so eat too much, feel really full, or wasted. And a lot of times we do both. So portions have gotten bigger, even though we haven't been able to eat more. And then the bagels at the bottom too is just an example. The bagel on the left, the smaller bagel, is the size it would have been in the 1970s. And then the bagel on the right is the size it is now. I have no idea why bagels are horribly large, but they are. And now we're forced to eat a whole bagel, and oftentimes we do. So we see food waste heavily at this intersection of grocery stores and restaurants. There definitely is waste there. But what the study found, the National Resource Defense Council study, is the biggest wasters in this whole chain is actually us, consumers. And we don't often realize this because it's a little bit at a time. It's, you served yourself too much and you scrape it into the trash can or the compost bin. That food spoiled in the back of your fridge, like the picture on the right, where we just forget about it. So we don't realize it. Maybe we realize it when we're cleaning out the fridge. That might be the only time. But because it's little bit by little bit, it doesn't seem to sink into us that we waste a lot. But we do. Of all of this, we waste 25% of all of our food. And so that's like leaving the grocery store with 4 bags of food, walking out, dropping a bag in the parking lot of food, and just leaving it there. That's how much food we waste at home. So now that I've depressed you, I will say, though, that no one that I've ever met in doing these presentations for the last few years has ever wanted to waste food. No one said, Jenny, I really enjoy wasting food and I want to do it more. No, we all hate wasting food. So then why do we do it? Well, many reasons, and this is actually shown in studies. Our brain is on automatic. I'm sure you can relate to the gentleman lying in the grocery store aisle. You're just done. You're tired. It's been a long day. You don't know what you're cooking for dinner. Your brain is on automatic when you go to the grocery store, when you're planning your meals, if you do any planning, and you do the same routines, and you buy without intention. We also have, here's a new fun word for you, a dynamic lifestyle, which all that means is we're very busy. And this phrase is tied more towards young adults or millennials, but I can tell you everyone has this. This is an example of this is, okay, you planned all your meals, but your friends called up on Tuesday and want to go to happy hour. Okay, great. You meet them at the bar and you might eat your meal there. So now any meal that you planned for that night is ruined. Like you're not using it. You don't have another plan for it. Or you're just really busy and you don't have time to cook. So then you buy more from grocery stores or restaurants, and that's another level of wasting. The next reason is, of course, no planning at all. You just go every day without a plan. It's one way to live, especially if you have a very busy life, but it can be overwhelming, especially in our trash cans. Another pretty simple one, actually, that we don't talk about a lot, but I'm going to talk about it here, is we don't store our food the right way to make it last the longest. We often store our food in the way our parents did, and they store based on their parents. Well, food storage has changed quite a bit, actually. Like our grandparents or great-grandparents might have not even had fridges. Maybe they had ice boxes. They had more different kinds of preserved food. And now we have gigantic fridges. So we don't question how we're storing food, and we're going to talk about the right way to store them. The first step to figuring out what you can do best at your home is doing this challenge. So I'm really excited that you're a part of it. I've been doing the challenges and the presentations for about 2.5 years, and no one has ever taken me up on letting me just live with them for 2 weeks and watching them in their kitchens. I don't know why, but they haven't invited me in. So no one wants to be observed to see what bad habits you have, of course, but you can observe yourself. So the whole reason we do these food waste challenges is to really look at ourselves in our kitchen and our habits. And so you're taking the biggest step that you can in reducing your wasted food. So congratulations. We do have 33 people signed up for this food waste challenge. We had one in January in February as well earlier this year, and we had 80 people sign up, but of course people dropped off, so we actually had 30 people complete the whole challenge. It was more of a matter of weather. When people were supposed to pick up all of their supplies, it was the polar vortex. So it hampered our resources a little bit. But I hope all of you get to finish the challenge throughout the 4 weeks. So let's talk about it. What you'll be getting, we'll talk about all of your tools and why they matter. You'll have a packet with a bucket and an envelope of your tools that will be waiting for you at 2 locations, actually 3 locations, and I'll send this in an email. It'll be at the Western Service Center in my office in the Environmental Resources office during the day. We close at 4:30, but they'll be there. You'll also have them at the the Lakeville City Hall during open hours, and then at the Farmington Library during their hours. So I'll send all that in an email so you know where and when to pick up all of your materials. What you'll get though, let's familiarize yourself. You'll get a bucket, just like the bucket in this picture, and we're going to be looking at the scale on the bucket. It's a 2.5 quart bucket, and we're going to be using that to monitor our wasted food. The first document we'll really talk about is the Track What You Toss document, which is this other picture. So you'll be getting, you'll be putting the food in your bucket, food that you would have eaten, could have eaten, but didn't eat. Not your potatoes, or not your banana peels or your bones or your eggshells, because I haven't figured out how to eat banana peels. I'm sure you haven't either. So we're not going to count any of that. If you do happen to compost and you collect those things for your compost, I would encourage you to do that how you normally collect your compost, but use this bucket for your food that you should have eaten but didn't. And on the back of this Track What You Toss, we go into everything that, we'll go into it here. We'll go into everything that you can collect. So here is what you collect. Any food that you could have eaten. So leftovers from home cooking or takeout, any spoiled meat, grains or bread, veggies, produce, lettuce, any of that that's gone bad that you couldn't eat, and any moldy or spoiled dairy products. What you don't collect, you'll see on the right-hand side here, fruit peels or rinds, eggshells, coffee grounds or coffee, tea or tea bags, soda or water, bones, shells from nuts, and beer, wine, and liquor. The only two liquids that we will be tracking are milk and juice. And we chose those ones because they're very resource intensive, especially milk, and they're in a container that's more easily trackable. So what we'll do is you'll put everything in the top part, starting with leftovers to the dairy area or the dairy check mark. All of that goes into your bucket. The milk and juice, you'll just estimate based on its container. So if you had a gallon of milk and maybe an eighth of it was left, then you'll track an eighth, like you'll put that eighth of a gallon in your tracking sheet. So they get to stay in their containers, and then you do whatever you would normally do with your liquids and leftovers after you've tracked them. So if you feed something to the dog, then track it, but then you can feed it later. You can, if you use your garbage disposal, do that. If you put it in the trash, do that, etc. So you'll put all of that in your bucket. And then if your bucket is full before the end of the week, then dump it out and handle it how you normally would, and then start filling it again. Just make sure you track that you had then 2.5 quarts. Put that on your volume tracking sheet. So the tracking sheet you'll fill out and this is more for you just to document for yourself in case it's easier to write on, put this on the fridge, track, and then we'll get into how you actually tell me your weight or your volumes. So any questions about what we are collecting? Kind of the biggest part. I don't see anything in the chat, so we will continue. So week 1, you're going to collect everything. You're going to do everything normally. It's your baseline week. You're not going to do anything special except collect your wasted food. Then weeks 2 through 4, you're going to keep collecting like week 1, but you're going to try out the tools we're going to talk about. So that's what we'll get into. So here's your tracking report. I will go to this link after we go through some of the tools, but you'll get an email from me every week saying, hey, great job. Here's the link to report your numbers and some tips. And so you'll have the link every week sent to you, but you can also save it on your browser. Okay, we talked about that. So the first tool we'll talk about is meal planning. It's one of the best things we can do, but it's the hardest sometimes as well. So meal planning does not come naturally to a lot of people. Myself, I'm 35. I did not grow up. My mom did plan meals for the week, but I never realized how she did it. She never taught me. We just kind of figure it out as you have a family or you have to feed yourself. And so I didn't start planning meals until I was in my 30s. And I wish I knew how to plan meals. I would have reduced a lot of waste in my 20s. So here's kind of, you might already plan your meals, and that's great. You can continue doing that. I encourage you to try out this meal planner just to see if it's easier for you. So my husband and I did this for a year or two, and now we can do it on the back of an envelope, now that we've kind of got that down. The biggest, the line on here, the row on here that would mean the most to you that people forget is actually putting down your evening activities. Again, we all have those dynamic lifestyles. So put down things that would stop you from cooking dinner. That could be you have choir practice one night, the kids have soccer, you have a meeting, and you won't get home till 7:30, and you won't be able to cook a meal. Put those down, because that will influence the dinners that you'll be creating. And that might be common sense, right? Like, oh, of course, like I can't cook that meal. One thing that when I've been doing these presentations is people get really overwhelmed with having to plan 7 meals. And I was too, when I started meal planning many years ago. 7 meals just sounds so overwhelming. Like you can't wrap your mind around it. Well, once you actually put down your evening activities, you'll see that you might only need to plan 3 or 4 meals. And that is way more doable than 7 meals. It's more realistic. It's cheaper on your budget too. And you can really plan out like 7 or 3 or 4 meals, way easier. You'll also, other tips that I have for you that I've learned and that other people have told me, have a day that is kind of your, like, don't plan on a day. Like for my household, Friday, we don't plan any meals on Friday in case something comes up during the week and it bumps one of our meals, so then we'll have it Friday. Or in case you have a lot more leftovers than you realize throughout the week, then you could have an eat it up night on Friday. So you could pick a day, whatever that might be, Saturday, Sunday, whatever you want, and that can be your kind of no planning day. Also, in my household, we don't plan meals on the weekends because we just have a lot going on, and we kind of use up what we might have in the fridge before we go plan another meal. So really, we only plan Monday through Thursday, so 4 meals, and that is way easier to do. You might have tips too, and I'll be asking you throughout the weeks like what your tips might be, and we'll share tips. Then on the bottom part of the worksheet, you don't see all of it, but you'll see the 3 columns: meals to make. So you'll list the meals that you've decided to make. And this next column we forget about, ingredients of those recipes that you already have on hand. So we call this shop your kitchen first. And then what's left are the actual ingredients you need to go buy. And you'll notice that it's half of the things that you thought you might need. And this list is what you bring to the grocery store. And it's so much easier to bring this list than all of your recipes and everything that you might need. So shop your kitchen first. You can also do it the opposite way of going to see what's in your kitchen and then looking up recipes based on what you have on hand to make sure you use it up. That's meal planning. Storage, you'll also get in your packet a fun, I think I have another picture. No, a fun keep it fresh food storage guide. And so it folds open. It's really beautiful of where you should store everything. And even if you don't read it, the biggest thing you can take away is think about where you bought it in the grocery store. Was it in the area where it's colder and they spray it with water? Well, that means it needs to be in a crisper drawer with high humidity and cold. Was it out in the middle of the grocery section, like in the middle of the produce section, like apples? And tomatoes actually are in the middle. They don't need to be cold unless you want to kind of pause their ripening. Like if they're really ripe, then you could put them in the fridge. So think about where you bought things and store them how the grocery store stored them. Other tips that I want to mention, those bananas in there. So bananas and apples I call the bullies of the produce world. They're not really, but all produce give off what we call, all produce give off what we call ethylene gas. So it's just a fancy word for gas that makes itself ripen. That way, if you're a plant and you have these fruits, then you want your fruit to start decaying in the forest or wherever they are so that your seeds can then be released and you can have more plants. It's totally natural. Apples and bananas give off the most of this gas. So what happens when we put apples or bananas with our other oranges or pears or whatever in our beautiful fruit bowl is they'll make the other fruits ripen much more quickly. So if you don't want that to happen, then store your apples and bananas to the side, which I know is not as pretty as a fruit for your fruit bowl. The other thing is to take advantage of that. Say you have a party the next day and you want to make guacamole and you go buy avocados, but the avocados are hard because we're in Minnesota and we can never get ripe avocados. They grow so far away from us. Well, put those avocados in a paper bag with a banana and just put them overnight in a, on your counter or wherever. And magically, that banana gave off gas to ripen the avocados. So now you have ripe avocados and you're ready for your party. There's other tips in there as well. I encourage you to read that. Also get to know your fridge a little more. Your fridge should be around 38 to 40 degrees. Newer fridges at least have they actually tell you digitally what your fridge is at. I have an older fridge where it has the 1, 2, 3, 4, which mean nothing, right? We have no idea what those mean. So you can actually put a thermometer in there if you have an alcohol thermometer. Put it in there and just kind of see what your fridge is. Maybe things are going right faster because it's at a higher temperature. The coldest part of your fridge is the middle part. That's where you should store your dairy and your meats, in the middle of your fridge. That also means your milk. We grew up putting our milk in the door of the fridge, which is actually the warmest part of our whole fridge. Now, if you're going through a gallon of milk or a liter of milk every day or every other day, this is not a concern for you. But if you need your milk to last a little longer, don't store it in the door of your fridge. That's where things get to room temperature more quickly. Also, in your crisper drawers, your vegetables should be stored in one drawer, and your fruits, if they go in the fridge, stored in a different drawer. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about there. And freezers. So I recently discovered my freezer about 2 years ago. I don't know what I did with it before. I think I stored ice and maybe some frozen pieces in there. And then I realized after doing a lot of these talks and experimenting, the freezer is a magical appliance in our homes that we don't use to its full power. We are just a household of 2, and often recipes call for 4 to 6 portions. And I either overate those portions or I threw them out because I didn't want to eat that leftover anymore. Well, now that I discovered my freezer, I freeze a lot more. And if I'm not sure if it'll freeze, I freeze it. And if it doesn't work out, it was going to be wasted anyways. So freezing is amazing. You'll have some freezing. You'll have a sheet on some tips for freezing when you get your packet as well. But tips right now, freeze in portions, as I have learned the hard way. If you have a ton of soup left, don't put all the soup in a freezer bag, because then when if you only want some of it later, like half of that, then you have to thaw the whole bag just to get half of it. So freeze in portions and put the mark on your bag, label your bag with how much is in there, like, oh, this is 2 servings. Keep air away from your foods in the freezer as much as possible. Oxygen is what's causing the freezer burn. So the more air you can keep away from your foods, the better. Of course, leave room for liquids. We all learned in elementary school science class that liquids, when frozen, expand. So same thing in your freezer. If you're freezing anything that was a liquid, make sure it has room to expand. Blanching, which is a horrible sounding word that is really easy to do. I was always afraid of blanching, but it's so easy. You only need to blanch things, really vegetables. Vegetables that have a lot of nutrients in them. Blanching traps those nutrients in, and so that they don't disintegrate or deteriorate in the fridge. They don't go away. So blanching, all it is boiling water and having a bowl of ice water next to it. You dip your vegetables, spoonful at a time, into the boiling water for, about 5 to 10 seconds. and then immediately put them in the ice water for a few seconds, and then they're blanched. That's all it is. And then you put them in a freezer bag or a bowl and freeze them. Easy. That's what I wanted to focus on there. There's a ton of other ideas, like in the lower right picture, pesto. If you make pesto, or you buy a lot but you don't use it regularly, you can put pesto or tomato sauce in ice cube trays, and then they're portioned out into tablespoon bits. Also, bananas. If you have bananas that have gone brown and well, use them for a smoothie or a shake, a smoothie or banana bread, freeze them without their peels on them. You'll be a much happier person in the future. Frozen peels are a lot harder to get off. This is something, the next phase that my household had to work on, and now we're much better. It's remembering what you have at home. So this is what's in stock. It's an inventory spreadsheet, and it's the first column. You can see the first area is refrigerator, then freezers, and pantry. In our household, we were really bad at remembering what was in our freezer. So we actually made this whole worksheet, the freezer, and it's on our freezer right now. I'm looking at it, and we put the item that if I put something in the freezer, you put the item, how much it is, and the date added, and then as you take it out and use it, you cross them off. So that is, I believe you'll get a laminated version of this. I believe we laminated it. So then you can also use a dry erase marker. So then you can just keep using it, keep adding and subtracting to it. Date labels is another confounding mystery to people, and for good reason. Like we assume date labels are there to keep us healthy and safe. Well, date labels, if I was in front of you, I would ask you, I'd make you guess what, there's only one product in the US that has to be labeled by law, date labeled by law by the federal government. And if I was there with you, I would make you guess what it is. A lot of times we hear dairy or eggs, meat. Nope. The only thing that has to be labeled with a date is baby formula out of everything. And that's because if that could actually hinder or stop or slow down growth of children. Everything else, every other date that you see is completely made up by the manufacturer. The government has nothing to do with date labels that way. So date labels really mean, it's really talking, it's the manufacturer talking to the grocery store about when they should clear their shelves. It usually means more of like their peak quality. It doesn't have anything to do with safety. It has to do with like what they can guarantee of their peak freshness. But you definitely will not get sick a day after your yogurt has expired. Like if you're going to get sick from your yogurt, it's probably because it was stored improperly, or mostly stored improperly, or like meat, if it's handled improperly, not because of any date labels. Yes, so date labels, you can ignore them. They also grant us a false sense of security too, because the opposite has been shown in studies where we eat things because it's within the date label, even though they might have smelled bad or looked bad, we still eat them because we think, oh, it's fine. So you can pretty much ignore date labels and think back to what our parents, grandparents did, because date labels are relatively new, within the last 30 to 40 years. What did we do before date labels? We used our senses. We smelled it. We tasted it. We looked at it. And our bodies are really good at knowing when things taste bad, or when, evolutionarily we've adapted to learn how to weed out things that might harm us. So use your body, use your senses. The other thing you'll get is the sticker. It says eat first, and you're going to make an area of your fridge with any kind of bin. You can use a bin, or you can just put this on the shelf. And this is going to be your eat first area of your fridge. Don't get me started on how ridiculously large our fridges are for not really needing that large of a fridge, even if you have a large family. We pack almost a lot of food, even though but then when we do that, we forget about the food in the back. There's no reason our fridges need to be so deep that we can't see things in the back. This eat first area is to reduce that, so it doesn't push things to the back. If you cut up an apple, or you cut up half an onion for a meal and you still have the other half, you put it in your eat first area. or things that you know, like you have milk, but you just bought a new milk. Well, then before that other milk, the new milk gets opened, you put your older milk in your eat first area to make sure that that's that's eaten first. It helps with also meal planning. So if you're looking at your meal plan, you'll go to your eat first area and say, oh, I've got half a container of feta cheese I need to use. What can I do with that? So this will be a sticker. I encourage you. It looks exactly like that, so you can color it in, get the kids involved. They could make their own. You don't have to use our sticker at all. They could make their own sign as well. And then we have the internet at our disposal. These are 3 sites that I recommend, but there's many more out there as well. They all do the same thing, but I'm going to talk about recipes because that happens to be the one I use. I've used it for more than a decade. The greatest thing about having these apps and internet or websites is that they don't just find recipes for you. You can search by ingredients. So for instance, you go into all recipes and, well, this is one of my favorite stories. I had pot roast that I had made one night, and I was so sick of having it for that dinner and then left lunch for the next day. I just didn't want to have pot roast again. So I went to allrecipes.com, and in the advanced search of the website, you can actually put ingredients. So I put in pot roast, and then it comes up with all the recipes that have pot roast as an ingredient. So it came up with this amazing Moroccan pie that I would have never stumbled upon, and it's one of my favorite meals now. So there you go, and they all do that. Also, if you use these sites a lot or another site, all of these sites have a shopping list option. You can actually add recipes to your shopping list. So it adds all the ingredients to a shopping list. It sorts it by what they, like the categories, like it puts all the produce together and all the meats together. So no more like, if you write it down on the back of an envelope, no more like going to the produce area and then forgetting something when you leave and having to go back. It does that all for you. And the best thing is I actually, if I'm planning my meals at home, I take my phone, like when my shopping list that's up on my phone, I go to my kitchen and I mark off the things on my shopping list that I already have. And it feels good just to like cross them out, right? You just click them on the internet, the website, and they're gone. And then you only are left with maybe 10 things that you have to go buy. All of these websites do that. For more information, you have SaveTheFood.com. It's a national website run by the National Resource Defense Council with help from the Ad Council, which is the nonprofit arm of the government to do advertising, public service announcements. It's a wonderful website. They have more tips on cooking, storing, and different things like how to waste less food with kids and how to freeze better. Love this website. Please go to it. You also have our website, which is dakotacounty.us, and that'll be the one where it has all the links for everything that you can go there and get your questions answered. If you need to print off more worksheets, you can always do that as well. So with that, I'm going to, I saw a question. Amanda says, oh, Nita, I never knew that about the avocado and banana. Yeah, I know, right? Now you're going to be a superstar, and you're going to tell everyone at that party how you make guacamole in a day. Okay, so I'm going to go, I stopped sharing, and I'm going to go to the website where we actually have, you're not going to see it yet, but okay. Oh, I guess I could just do, I'm going to show you the website of reporting, and then that'll be our last thing. So please ask any questions while I'm doing this, if you have any. Hello, there we go. Okay, reporting is pretty easy, and it's all in either ounces or liters. There we go. Okay, I'm going to the website now. And my computer's just being a little slow, of course. And there is still time if you know any friends or family, there is still time to sign up. I'm recording this whole session, so anyone who signs up a little later for the challenge, I'm going to send them the recording, and that can be your training. Stacy says, is there any info materials on the best way to store food in the freezer or fridge? Like plastic bags versus other containers. There's not. There's, of course, people that are very, they're trying to reduce plastic in their lives. So they decide to only use mason jars or more durable plastic. I've used all of that. If glass scares you in case they break in the freezer, I don't do it, especially for liquids. But there's really no better way to do it. I happen to like plastic bags for more liquid things, or not liquid, liquid soups and things, because I can get the air out more easily, if that makes sense. But there really is no best. And if I've seen any one that says one's better than the other, it's usually because of a different goal, like reducing plastics. Okay. All right, food waste challenge reporting. I just had to go a backwards way to this, but I'm going to share the screen with you. All right, so you're seeing my behind the scenes SurveyMonkey, but this is what you'll see when you click on the reporting link. Okay, pretty easy, your name, because I track you over the 4 weeks I can tell you if you've reduced your waste. And I haven't updated this, obviously. You choose which week you're reporting on. So you'll have week 1, June 2nd through whatever, week 2, week 3, week 4. The total volume, so it can be in liters or ounces of your bucket, and don't include your liquids here. Then number 4 is any volume of your milk or juice you'll put in there, and just tell me what, if it's ounces or liters. Then what types of food did you collect this week? And you can put in other if you're not quite sure. Why did the food go bad this week, or why didn't you eat it? Some options there, check all. And then any other common suggestions as you're going through the challenge. As we do go through, I'll have some prompts. So this number 7 will change a little bit. And if you want questions answered, week 1 in February, someone asked, I'm having a hard time reducing my wasted food with kids. Do you have any suggestions? So I put it out to the group of sharing suggestions. And we got, over 25 responses, all about here, this is what I try this, plus some others that I've heard in doing these trainings as well. So if you have any questions, you can put them in that number 7 box as well. Okay, any last minute questions as we wrap up here? Great. Well, I will send you information on where to pick up your supplies, and it'll have a link to this recording too in case you want to go over anything. But thank you so much for taking 45 minutes of your Sunday to join me today. Thank you all. Bye.